Firstly, I want to thank the leadership of this great hospital, ΜΗΤΕRA Hospital, and the warm welcome. I want to thank Dr. Vasilis, who sponsored my visit here and made me feel so welcome with his generosity in both time and support. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come. I'm a little bit in awe coming to speak to you after such an eminent researcher and professor in Dr. Christiakis, who can go between speaking in Greek and speaking in English. I apologize, I won't be able to speak in Greek, but you'll forgive me for that, I hope. What I wanted to do was to talk to you about something that I've found over the 35 years that I've been in clinical practice and doing research, has emerged as being an important skill, an important attribute that most of us as healthcare professionals need to adopt. And this talk and this training came about as I went around the world, including at Harvard, in teaching people about and applying some of the things that Dr. Christiakis spoke to. And the idea of how you change and how people look at you as an individual, as a professional, and integrate that with all the advances that we've now come to appreciate in branding, social of yourself as a brand, but also how you project yourself to the world more broadly. That's going to be the topic of my presentation. See if I can move the slide forward. So we went through my biography a little bit. I just want to say I'm one of those people who have tried to, in America, they call us quadruple threat physicians. Quadruple threat physicians are people who do clinical work, who do education, who do research, and who do administrative leadership. I think many of the people on the podium and in this room are exactly that. We talk about work-life balance. We don't have work-life balance because we are trying to do so many different things at the same time. I've been a chief academic officer in the Harvard system, been an executive director of a foundation. I continue to do that, and also senior associate dean at the medical school. The focus of my talk on medical branding is really about something called personal branding. Personal branding is the practice of how people market themselves and their careers. And it was a term developed by Tom Peters in 1997. And every one of you, whether you are a doctor or you are a nurse, any form of healthcare professional, your personal brand is how you appear to the world. Doctors with strong brands are clear about who they are. And I would like to say that as you advance in your career and you want to be more successful, one of the things you want to do is you want to adopt the idea of being a leader of people, whether it's a leader of a division or a department, of a unit, or of the hospital, or maybe even beyond that. Many people think of branding as being an inauthentic thing, right? Why do I need to brand? I just be who I am, right? But the truth is, everyone around you is thinking about how they are wanting to project themselves to others. And if you want to project yourself as a leader, you have to project yourself in perhaps a different way than you currently project yourself. And that's really the talk that I'm going to be discussing with you. So personal branding for doctors might include the story people think of when they think of you. Could think of you as a great physician, as a great scientist, a make it happen person, someone who is one of the best in their university, someone who's willing to help all the time, someone who has done a body of work in research that people respect, or someone who puts the organization first. These are things that you can modulate about yourself in the eyes of other people. And some of you perhaps think, well, I'm too old to do this anymore, right? But what I would tell you is that most people who are mid-level in their careers and want to be seen as a leader, want to be seen as an individual that projects a certain leadership quality, needs to think about this. This is an issue that has not just impacted the marketing world, which is where this started, but it's now impacted science as well. And this was a cover of Science magazine, one of the foremost academic journals in the United States, arguably in the world. And the issue of this journal talked about how scientists need to start thinking about branding themselves properly. Think about the science of branding, of science of how people view them. And if you're a scientist, you have to be viewed in a certain way. If you are a clinician, you might want to be viewed in a certain other way. But as a leader, you have to be viewed in ways that project your ability to manage people and lead people. And this next slide really discusses this evolution. So many of us, early in our careers, focus on gathering knowledge, right? That's what I did. The first 5 to 10 years after I graduated from medical school, my focus was, how do I know things more than anyone else? As a nephrologist, I wanted to be an expert in specific areas, lead a unit that people would come to me from all over the world for my expertise in a particular area. I needed to develop technical skills. If you're a surgeon, this becomes important in the first 10 years of your life as a surgeon. You want to do enough operations, complicated, develop a reputation so that people send patients to you. Other surgeons send patients to you. But then, after you've done all of that, some of us want to become leaders. We want to become leaders of our department. We want to become leaders of our hospital. And I remember talking to a very famous cardiothoracic surgeon in one of the top universities on the East Coast in the US. And he said to me, you know, I've been a cardiothoracic surgeon for 20 years, and for the 10 years, I chaired my department. And then I thought to myself, I want to apply for the position that became vacant of my hospital. So I put my name in. And he said, to my astonishment, I was not shortlisted for this position. They didn't want me. So I went back and asked people, what was the cause for this? I just thought it was obvious. I have people's hearts in my hand. I lead a team of people in the operating room. I lead a department in the hospital that brings in the most money to this hospital. Why in the world would they not want me to be the person who leads this hospital? And he said, what I understood after people gave me confidential feedback was, they didn't think of me as a leader. They didn't want to follow me. They did not want to be someone who they work for. And so he said, I need to develop a different brand, a different impression I give to people so I can compete for these type of jobs. That, in essence, is what medical branding is all about. And this idea of being a leader is part of your medical brand and becomes more and more important as you get more and more advanced in your career. Now, there is social theory. I know Professor Christiakis, as a very leading social scientist, talked about network theory, and he's certainly an expert in this. But I want to share with you some work from another social scientist. His name is Irving Goffman. He's dead now. He's ranked as one of the top social scientists in the world. And he came up with a theory called the identity and self-presentation theory. And what his theory talks about through multiple experiments is explores the way that people want to be seen and how people are perceived by their peers. And he talks about this in 2 stages, a front stage and a backstage. The front stage is what people see of you. when you come to work, when you interact with them. The backstage is what people are at home. And you'd be shocked to know there are people out there who are incredibly successful, who are very different in their backstage to what we see them in their front stage. And this includes physicians, scientists, of course it includes many politicians, many people in the media. There are people who are social and interactive, and you think to themselves they are a huge extrovert. And when they go home, they don't want to socialize. They're quiet and they're to themselves. And this distinction between your front stage and your backstage is something that many people have developed as a skill. The idea that you take someone who's relatively quiet, but who wants to succeed as a leader, he or she have to transform themselves to become a people person or an extrovert. And this impression management, albeit it sounds inauthentic, we want people who are our leaders to be the same, front stage or backstage, but in fact, that is not the case in many circumstances. And what you do to manage your front stage is what will be important if you want to be applying for leadership positions or to be considered a leader. Sometimes your front stage and your backstage will be the same. You're born a leader. You grew up as a leader. You've always been a leader, and you go become a leader. How many people know individuals like this? On the other hand, there are people who are not born as a leader. Then they didn't take on leadership roles in high school or in college or medical school or wherever, but now they want to be a leader. How did they get projected as a leader? I ask you that. So I'm going to pause at this point, and I'm going to just ask the audience just to raise your hand. How many people in this room have actually thought about their own brand? And how many people actively manage their own brand? Just raise your hand. About 10 or 15 people. But on the podium and in the front row, more people have thought about their brand than people in the rest of the room. What does that tell you? It tells you your leaders here have been thinking about their brand. They think about it, they manage it, and they nurture it. So if you want to be in positions of leadership, you have to know what you're up against. You want their job at some point, you've got to project yourself as a leader. And that's an important piece of the learning. So what are the things that are important to develop a front stage identity? There are 3 attributes I will put here: consistency, connectedness, and charisma. Consistency is how you appear and project yourself. Who are you as a person? You know, I look at you in the room, and I'm already reading in the room those people who are interested in this talk and those people who are skeptical, right? I'm looking at you. You're looking at me, but I'm looking at you. And I can already see people who are on their cell phone or mobile phone, people whose body language is a certain way. Your projection in your appearance is being read by me just as much as you are reading other people's projections, right? And how they appear. Connectedness. This Professor Christiakis talked about. Connectedness is all about the network. How you are and how you develop your network is going to be part of your front stage identity. Right? We have a reputation as people, colleagues who are at the center of their network. Everybody wants to get to know them. They're considered connectors, right? Everybody wants to invite them to their department party or to meet them. They're people, you go to international scientific meetings and you text them and say, can we meet for dinner or lunch? They're connectors. That connectivity is part of their front stage. And then the third is charisma. How you interact with people in the way you interact with people is really important. So we'll talk about some of them. This is appearance and projection. This picture shows you the different ways people project themselves, right? Some of you are sitting, slouching, thinking about something else. I am looking at you, and I'm trying to read, what are you thinking about at this moment in time? That's part of your appearance and projection. I go to meetings in my department, and I look at people around the table, and I look at their posture, and I look at how they're breathing. Did you know that? People do this, who've studied the science of this, to understand what is their attitude going to be in this meeting. Are they interested? Are they positive? Are they going to be open? Or am I coming into a meeting where I'm going to be dealing with people who are not interested in discussing the topic we have or in coming to some agreement? People are reading that. There are people who have a closed body language, right? You met people like this. Their arms are like this. These are people that are being read as closed, not interested in other people's opinions. Then the voice you use, right? How you speak, how you behave in meetings, how you write emails, the tone, the speed, the intonations, whether you can vary how you speak from soft when it needs to be soft to more firm when you need to be firm, how you control your voice is all part of your exterior, your front stage. And do you look the part? Are you, people who are scientists, you see them. The scientists, they usually walk around with maybe a t-shirt or a loose-fitting shirt. People who are senior physicians will walk around with ties. If you're an administrative leader, you have a suit and tie. How you project yourself is very, very important. Here's an example of one person and how he projected himself. The founder of Apple Computer, Steve Jobs. Many of you have heard of him, right? Seen him. Look at his appearance from 1998, public appearance from 1998 to 2009, just before he died. He would always appear in the same clothes. Not literally the same clothes, but the same type of clothes. He was projecting a certain image that he wanted others to take with them. This is not how he dressed at home. In fact, he didn't dress like this at all. If you look at the founder of Facebook, the only time in his whole career that he's ever worn, or he's ever worn a tie, was one time when he presented to the United Senate. At all other times, in all social gatherings, he never wore a tie. Why did he decide, perhaps one of the richest men, most powerful men in the world, to wear a tie going to this Senate hearing? Because he wanted people to know who were at the hearing that he was serious. So he wore a tie. Why was it so important? Because at stake was regulation around his company and all social media companies. So he needed to convince people, I'm being respectful to you, I take this seriously, and I'm just as professional as you are, right? So this idea of managing that. Now, keeping in touch, connectedness, keeping in touch is really important. I don't know if you do it or not. I have maybe 30 WhatsApp groups, professional and private. I send maybe 250 Christmas cards or greeting cards every year to people. And even then, I'm not connected enough. I didn't even realize till Vasilis told me that there was a colleague of mine that I trained with, a guy called Professor Dimitris Vlahakos, who's a nephrologist, who I trained with, who is currently in Athens. He's now retired because he's 70 years old. But, I was able to get on the phone with him, having dinner with him on Saturday, part of the network, right? And how you communicate is important. Now, we heard from Professor Christiakis that building networks or having a network is important, and he studied these networks. And what I got out of his lecture was that there's a science to networks, right? And that the science, that networks can actually be quantitative mathematically to understand them and how they work. But at a practical level, networks must be maintained. They're not a one-time event. In order to maintain a network, you have to work. You have to keep in touch with people. You need to be targeted. You have to understand what networks you have and how you're going to build them. They can't be ad hoc. And they must be built before they're actually needed. And the power from a network is proportional to the effort you put into it. So networks are incredibly important. quality networks are used to make things happen. And if you don't have a professional network that you are nurturing and developing, then you are not in the game like some of the people who also want to be leaders. Not all attempts to work and develop networks are successful, but, and you have to be aware of that, but they're important. Networks are also important because you can influence people from these networks. It could make you a key player if you're the middle of that network. It could make you more indispensable if you're in the middle of the network. But the more important thing for you as an individual, if you want to be considered a leader, is it can make you more visible internally, but also externally. And people ask me from an academic standpoint, how much do you network with people, or where do you network with? I go to, last year I went to 6 international meetings, right? And about 50 to 60% of my time in these international meetings were met with meeting with people. Every night I had in my schedule, I had a dinner with someone or a group of people. I met people for coffee. I met people for drinks. I use the meeting to network more than I use to look at the science. My view is if I'm hearing about the science for the first time in a meeting, I'm not in touch with the science adequately in my institution during the year. In my area, I need to know it before it's even presented, right? But what I do with my meetings is to network with people to think about the next step, the next trial I want to be part of, the next group I want, writing group that I want to be working with for a paper. So that's the power of networks for me. The next topic that I would just want to briefly discuss is this concept of charisma. Charisma is the ability to attract, charm, and influence the people around you. Just as a quick show of hands, how many people feel that they are charismatic? Only 5 people in this whole room. Maybe you don't want to raise your hand because you don't want to tell people I'm charismatic. But it's pretty shocking, right? Not many people even willing to raise their hand. Charisma is defined as the positive feeling you engender in other people. How you make other people feel about you defines your charisma. If you can walk in a room and can be charismatic, it is really how the good feeling you have that people think about you. So I remember one day I was invited to go to a meeting with then President Clinton, right? President of the United States. I went into the room. There were about these many people, and someone said, "Come, please come and meet him." I wasn't a particularly big fan of his, but you know, when somebody says, "Come meet the President of the United States," I figured I'd go and meet the President of the United States. Who am I compared to him? I go and meet him, and everybody told me he's charismatic. I go and meet him, and for the 2 minutes that he talked to me, his eyes were focused on me. He was listening, and he was responding in an appropriate manner. I walked away thinking I had met one of the most charismatic people that I've ever met, right? In contrast, several years later, I was invited to meet someone else who was actually standing for president. And all this person was interested was in himself. He wasn't interested in, you may even predict who that person might be. He was just interested in himself. He did not want to talk about anything else but about himself. Now, some people find that charismatic. I didn't, right? So how you feel about the person really defines charisma, and it varies. And what you want to do in your profession, in your work, you want to be viewed as a charismatic person. And it's about body language. It's about how making people feel included. It's really not necessarily about you, but it's about how people talk about you, about how you make others feel and how important they are. So people ask the question, how do I become more charismatic, right? Indeed, it is not something you are necessarily born with. There are people out there, there is science out there that focuses on how people can be more charismatic, how they can make people feel better, because charismatic people have a very high proportion who become leaders because people feel good about them. They want to hire them. They want them to be the leaders of their institution. It's about presence and self-confidence. You know a charismatic person walks into the room, everybody hushes and stops talking for a bit. Who is this person? Already there's a sense that somebody who's a leader has moved in. It's about this person being able to actively listen, about having empathy. They understand what you're going through. They may ask you a question. At our hospital, the Brigham and Women's now changed its name to Mass General Brigham because it's merged with another hospital. Mass General Brigham, about 6 years ago, we had a case where a son of a patient came into the cardiothoracic outpatient clinic, pulled out a gun, and shot the surgeon dead. Just like that. Shot him dead. He was a father of, had married, 3 children, young children. The hospital was completely reeling, shocked. How and what would happen here? The leader of our hospital at the time was a woman called Betsy Nabel. She had come from being the director of the National Heart-Lung Institute in Washington, D.C., and she was the CEO and president of the hospital. She decided the next morning, before anything else, to bring the unit together, the unit that faced this, and she stood there and she cried with them about how shocking this was. This public show of empathy defined her as a leader. Not necessarily the email she would send to say, hey, I'm so sorry this has happened, we'll recover, as an organization we'll pull together. It's the personal touch that made the difference for her, of her in this. How you project yourself, what you say, your relationships and networks are also very important. In this next article, this is an article from Harvard Business School, in the Harvard Business Review. They talk about the way people project themselves to be charismatic. The idea of using metaphors and similes and analogies, telling stories. Leaders tell stories. Leaders use analogies to describe situations. If you talk in a bureaucratic way about numbers and things, yes, you might be the leader, but you're an operational leader. To be a leader that inspires people, you got to inspire them by bringing it down to storytelling and analogies. You ask a rhetorical question. Leaders keep the number of things they share and communicate down to just 3 things. The human memory can't deal with more than 3 things. If I told you 3 things, or I told you 10 things, you're more likely to remember the 3 things than the 10 things. Charisma includes showing integrity, authority, passion, setting high goals, use of body, face, and language. And I'm going to share with you, see if this works, an example. This is an example of one of our presidents.
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get.
This is a president in his last speech talking about what he perceived as being important. And you can see how he used a metaphor of the country that he believed in. A shining city on the hill with, if it had walls, it had doors. You can immediately imagine what this place was, what he wanted people to think of as America, right? If the president of our country can use this, you can use it in your units, in your hospital. Using metaphors makes you look human, but gives people a sense of you and makes you look charismatic. Now, another way to do this is to develop your own personal narrative. People say, "What? I don't need to develop a personal narrative. Why do I need that?" Indeed, you do. If you're applying for a job, you're applying for a grant, you're applying to one of these gentlemen up on the podium for money, right? Right? You might want to go to the CEO's office and say, we need a new MRI in this hospital. It's going to cost us, €1 million. You're going to have to put that in words that that summarize the need for this. And you could do it in two different ways. You could say, we need an MRI because it's going to bring us more money. This is the profit statement, blah, blah, blah. You could also incorporate in that a story. You could say, we simply haven't got the ability to deal with the volume that we currently have. And there are people out there whose cancers aren't being diagnosed adequately or whose care is being impacted. Here's an example of that. The ability to shift the conversation to not just be about finance, but to be about a human side of this, the human face of this can come to be important. Here's an example of a surgeon talking about his patients and see what you think about this.
I don't have a job. I have a passion. My entire life, my entire being, I always wanted to be a doctor from my first memories. Never wanted to be anything else. I love my job because I get the ability to really take patients through some of the darkest times and get them through it, hopefully unscathed. If you come into my office, you'll see there's a sculpture that was commissioned by one of my patients, and it's a big stainless steel cocoon. And it came with a note about 10 years ago in which she said, "From all your butterflies, past, present, and future, you cocoon all of your patients, and they emerge as beautiful butterflies." And I think that really is it. It's the ability to take someone through a very terrifying experience, get them through relatively unscathed, and then bring them back and see them do well. I don't have a job. I have a passion. My entire life, my entire being, I always wanted to be a doctor from my first memories. Never wanted to be anything else.
So you can imagine right now, this is a breast surgeon, right? And he talks about how his personal narrative is taking patients that come into his practice, women who have maybe a cancer, and basically putting them in the equivalent of a cocoon to say, I'm going to be there for you, right? That's his personal narrative as a leader. So you don't have to, my view of surgeons are tough people, right? They have to deal with lots and lots of pressure situations. But how you project yourself, and here's an example of someone who projects themselves in a very positive way. So I'm going to stop at this point and summarize what I've shared with you. I hope some of it has been helpful. There are many, many things that are important in your leadership journey. And what I wanted to try and convince you is at least have in mind the importance of how you brand yourself, how you project yourself to the world, and understand that how you project yourself to the world is something that you have in your hands, that you can modify and you can change. It's very interesting. I'll tell you one last story. When I give this talk to surgeons quite frequently. And at the end of my talk, someone who's a woman surgeon raised a hand. She said, I came into my practice, and I was the only woman in my practice. I walked into the operating room in my scrubs, and they thought I was the theater nurse, right? And they asked me, where is the surgeon? When is the surgeon coming? And I said to them, I am the surgeon, right? I'm the surgeon. And she said, just gender itself, unfortunately, brands you. So she said, I had to make a change. I had to make a change. So the next time I came into the room or go on ward rounds, I'm at the head of this group of people, residents, junior surgeons, and everything, and I'm at the head of the thing. And I'm projecting to them that I'm in charge. I'm in charge. And she said, I had to manage my image in a way to tell people that I'm in charge. In our hospital at Mass General Brigham, our IDs, you know the IDs like you wear, our IDs have at the bottom of it what your position is if you're a doctor, right? Because oftentimes women doctors go into a room, and if they don't have that, patients think that they're the nurse, right? And so how you project yourself, so how did they deal with this? They put a badge there to say, I'm a doctor. But how you project yourself is really important. And how you develop your network and how you cultivate your network is also important. Just want to say thank you very much for your time, and I hope you got some benefit from it. Thank you.